Welcome to the August 3rd, 2023 Planning Commission meeting. September. Oh, that's September 7th. That's roll call. Jim Saunders. Here. Paul Ruge. Here. Bill Crowdy. Here. Paul Reeder. Here. And I'm here. Mr. Sutton indicated he would not be here, and I don't know if we've heard from Ray at all. We have the minutes of the August 3rd meeting before us. After the review, are there any questions, amendments to these as presented?
I didn't see any myself.
Neither did I.
I make a motion, we accept the minutes as presented.
Second.
Okay, thank you. We have a motion seconded. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, thank you. Our first application today is the application of Chop Tank Electric Cooperative Incorporated lot line adjustment, front yard setback, and this is a planning commission decision. Mark, thank you. Stafford, present.
Good afternoon. So Chop Tank Electric Cooperative is requesting a subdivision and lot line adjustment in order to establish a setback of 46 feet from the right-of-way. Purpose behind this request is to allow for configuration of the proposed expansion of the substation, which is currently there. That particular site plan has undergone concept and preliminary review, and will be having final site plan review in the future. In regards to the subdivision itself, when it was initially done in 89, the setback was not established at that time. The ordinance requires that for such subdivisions in this district that they be established at the point, or the setback be established at the point of subdivision, which had not been done. Therefore, the default setback was 100 feet from the right-of-way. So this is the purpose for the request, to establish that setback so they can pursue this configuration. In regards to establishing setback for subdivision review, there's a set of requirements, and comments in regards to those requirements are as follows: that the comprehensive plan is neutral on this proposal, and the proposal is in conformance with the county, state, and federal regulations, rules, and regulations. The proposal will allow for increased safety of vehicular flow within the site. There will be no water or sewage systems proposed for this parcel. No vegetation is removed, and landscape screening is proposed for the site development plan. Therefore, staff recommends that the Planning Commission approve the proposed lot line adjustment to establish the front yard setback to 46 feet.
Thank you, Mark. Is there any correspondence?
There are no correspondences on this.
Okay. Is the applicant or their representative available?
Yes, we're present. Yes.
Can you state your name and address for the records, please?
Yes, Michael No with Argrid Power on the behalf of Chop Tank Electric. We're at 501 North Main Street, Wake Forest, North Carolina.
My name is Robert Beadle. I'm also with Argrid Power, and same address.
Thank you. Can you raise your right hand? Do you declare the testimony you're about to give in this case will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thank you, sir. Okay, what can you tell us about this application?
Well, we've submitted that a little bit before, and the lot line adjustment is essentially being requested so that we can accommodate the electrical facilities that will help serve Chop Tank EC's members efficiently. In substations, there's a number of equipment with specialized clearances that have to go according to code. And when we kind of put in the equipment and lay everything out, that's where the requirement comes in for certain spacing of the equipment, and hence the request for the adjustment.
Thank you. Commission members, any questions for the applicant or staff?
And whenever this last month,
Hearing none, do you have anything else to present? You're comfortable? The applicants, you guys?
There were a couple items that we spoke about at the last meeting, and I just wanted to let everybody know where things were. One of the things were the two proposed driveways, in addition to the one existing, and that is in process with MDOT SHA. We got an update from them yesterday saying that they have turned it over to their utility department for review, but that is in process, so we're waiting on that. As well as we are waiting on a soil infiltration test from our geotechnical engineer, so we can complete the erosion sediment control plans and the stormwater management plans. It really doesn't affect the stormwater management, the erosion sediment control plan as much, but it does matter for the final stormwater management plans, designs, and calculations. So once we get the report from that, we can finalize that, and then we can tailor the erosion sediment control plan to work with what we plan to do for permanent stormwater BMP there.
Thank you.
We've also submitted the citizen improvement plan report as well. So Chop Tank has done a fantastic job reaching out to members who may be affected by the site and the plans, and they have not had any issues or questions come up regarding what they've communicated.
Thank you. Is there anyone online or in the public here that has questions or comments about this application? Hearing none, it's up here to the Planning Commission for deliberation and decision. Any problems with it?
Well, we're just talking about the lot line
Not
and
just-
the 46-foot.
That's it?
46 foot, yes. You want to do your normal.
Yeah, I make a recommendation that we grant final approval to Chop Tank Electric Cooperative located at 12305 Massey Road in Massey, Maryland, for the proposed lot line adjustment and reduction of the front yard setback of 46 feet. We find that it's in conformance with the comprehensive plan. It's conformance with the provisions of all applicable rules and regulations of the county, state, and federal agencies. They've proven convenience of safety of both vehicular and pedestrian movement within the site and in relation to the adjoining ways and properties. There's a reasonable demand placed on public services and infrastructure. There's no sewer and water needed on this project, and the area over which the existing vegetation is to be limited, and where any tree removal, if any, shall be given a planting of replacement trees.
I have a second to that?
Second.
Thank you. Any discussion? Hearing none, I'll vote yea or nay. Jim Saunders? Approval or not? Paul Ruge?
Yes.
Bill Crowding?
Yes.
Paul Reeder?
Aye.
And I'll vote with the majority. Thank you, gentlemen. Go and move on with your project.
Yeah,
Thank you.
Thank you very much for your time.
Yes, thank you. Our next application is Little Neck Farm Owners Association, and this is a pier length variance, and this is a recommendation to the Kent County Board of Appeals. Got your back, Mark, go ahead.
Yes. So Little Neck Farm Homeowners Association is requesting a variance to remove, replace, and further extend a non-conforming community pier. Community pier is located off Burris Road in the 5th election district. It's understood that the existing pier, the configuration, has been in existence since 1989. The complex does encroach 224 feet into Swan Creek, and that the main 240-foot-long portion that runs perpendicular to the shore extends, let's see here, channelward of the mean high water, beg your pardon, the shore. In 2013, the Homeowner Association was permitted to do an in-kind replacement of 80 feet of the fixed pier of the mean height water line channelward. The current configuration of the pier includes a 10-foot wide fixed pier extending 240 feet channelward, and there's a number of other figures for it. They've received approval by MDE and U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, authorized a change, a replacement within much of that pier, excluding the 80 feet that was replaced in 2013. There will be an aluminum gangplank going to the remainder of the pier that's to be established, or that configuration, that complex. The result will be that you'll have a movement 15 feet channelward from the mean high water line. So the comprehensive plan has the following comments in regards to submerged aquatic vegetation, in order that they be protected to the extent possible. The Article 5, Section 2.4B7 establishes the pier length at 150 feet or no more than a quarter way of the channel itself. Our comments in regards to these articles are as follows. Maryland's Environmental Resource and Land Information Network indicates that submerged aquatic vegetation is present along the shore where the proposed activity is to occur. As mentioned before, the first portion of the fixed piers remain in place, and that was done in 2013. Therefore, the existing subaquatic vegetation will not be affected by the proposed action. The proposed pier and all of its components will extend 239 feet channelward to the mean high water line, a 15-foot increase from that which is existing. The applicant has provided comment that the homeowner association and its member properties control substantial portions of the shoreline surrounding the community pier. Thus, there will be no adverse impacts to neighboring property owners. The proposal has been reviewed by the Kent County Health Department, Kent County Office of Emergency Services, Department of Public Works, and MDOT SHA. None have concerns or objections. The Maryland State Fire Marshal has commented that a standpipe system will be required to be installed in the pier in accordance with NFPA 303 if the extension of the pier measures to be more than 150 feet from the fire department vehicle access. A set of plans will need to be submitted to the fire marshal for review. This proposal would extend more than 150 feet from fire department vehicle access. The variance, applicable law toward that, does allow for the Board of Appeals to grant variances for pier length. There's a set of requirements for that. And our comments in regards to those requirements are as follows. The applicant has indicated the requested variance will not cause substantial detriment to adjacent neighboring properties nor change the character of the neighborhood or district. The parcel from which the pier extends is large and has in excess of 4,000 feet of shoreline. The neighboring properties are distant from the location of the pier, and there are no other piers within close proximity to it. Comprehensive plan is neutral in the application. At the June 6, 1988 meeting of the Board of Appeals, the board concluded that reaching a 6-foot depth would require going 260 feet channelward of the mean high water. That an L-shaped pier would minimize the length of the pier into the channel while maximizing the use of the pier, and that there were 5 miles of shoreline in the development. The board granted what was termed at the time special exception to construct a pier to extend beyond the maximum length and in an L configuration. Comments provided by the applicant indicate that practical difficulty is due to the shallow bathymetry of the waterway and the shifting sediments and growth of the shoreline vegetation, which have reduced navigability of the inner berths. Thus, the request to shift the pier complex channelward. The applicant indicates that increasing deterioration of the pier decking and pilings would make piecemeal repair a financially unviable option, that a severe storm could destroy part or all of the existing structure. The proposal is reasonable use of the parcel itself. Staff recommends sending a favorable recommendation to the Board of Appeals for variance of the pier length with the following condition: that a standpipe system be installed in the pier in accordance with the NFPA 303 and that plans be submitted to the fire marshal for review. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Is there any correspondence?
No correspondence.
Okay, thank you. Is the applicant or the representatives available? Can you step forward, please?
Should I sit?
Please. First, can you state your name and address for the record?
George Barnett, 6893 Hagee Road in Rock Hall.
Okay, can you raise your right hand? Do you certify the testimony you give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thank you, sir. Go ahead.
I think Mark kind of said it all. We're trying to replace the dock that's there. It's 30 years old. It's basically falling apart, so something needs to be done. We would like to move it out 15 feet so that the inner slips can be used. They're basically only good now for a pontoon boat or a canoe or a very small motorboat, and they're 30 feet long slips. They're generally useless for any kind of a sailboat or anything like that, but that's what we're trying to do.
Okay. Planning Commission, do you have any questions or comments to the applicant or staff?
Go ahead.
I do have a question. If you move the dock out 15 feet, I mean, I've been to your dock, I know it needs help.
Yeah.
If you move it out 15 feet from the shoreline, what is your plan for shoreline management?
Well, the shoreline management, I don't think is really affected by us moving. It's only, we only have less impact on it if we move out 15 feet.
I understand, but the purpose of the application for moving it out 15 feet is that the growth on the shoreline is impeding access. Do you foresee that not being a problem if you move it out 15 feet?
Oh, yeah, I think the shoreline just gets out of our way even more by moving it out,
Okay.
if I'm understanding your question.
Well, that's the question. Are you doing anything relative to the shoreline to keep your 15 feet
No,
intact?
no, we aren't,
Okay.
not yet.
What are the water depths there? I don't see anything on here that indicates any water depth.
They actually are, but they're so small on there that they're very hard to see. So you'll see lines on the drawing, and against those inner slips, it's 4 feet. And then closer to shore, it goes, down a foot for every line, basically.
And what we have, if you add 15 feet to it, what's the water depth going to end up being for those?
We're hoping to get almost 6 feet on the inner slips.
No, I'm not following where you are on this proposed site plan.
May I provide something that will help?
Yeah,
Yeah. So here's a map that was submitted, highlighted the symmetry lines.
Oh, I see it now.
Yeah. So start there, very tiny.
Six foot there.
And where is it on the, these are the same lines?
Well, I guess a question I have is, what did the Board of Appeals grant before? They said that at 260 feet, you had 6 foot of water, but you didn't go 260 feet. What was printed then, do you recall, anyone?
Yeah, I do have the document here if you wanted to look at it. Essentially, the ruling was, at least the comments about that situation, that to hit 6 feet depth, you'd have to go out that distance from the mean high water line. It wasn't that they granted the pier to be that far out, but they just established that would be the distance you need to be from the shore to reach that depth
Okay.
At that time.
at that time. At that time, I believe the pier length maximum was 100 feet from shoreline as well, according to the document.
So what's resulted in the change, Mark?
From 100 to 150, that I couldn't tell you. We talk about what the, in terms of the land use ordinance.
No, why the water depth from the time it was approved by the appeals board in 1987 to now has changed.
Assume there's any change in it as a result of sedimentation, which may not extend that far out. My understanding is that along the shoreline, and the purpose for moving out the additional feet, is you have sediment gathering along that portion where the inner berth are, as was described by the applicant in his narrative. So to allow for the boats to move in and have ability to navigate, that's the reason behind that further extension outward, for that purpose.
So it's tidal sedimentation that's reduced the depth of the water along the shoreline.
Along the shoreline.
Got it, okay. Okay, I got it.
Any other questions up here? Is there anyone in the audience or online wish to speak to this application? Okay, back here, we need to make a recommendation to the King County Board of Appeals. What are your thoughts?
The geese, it's not a wildlife staging area, is it?
No.
You know that for sure?
Pretty sure.
How are you sure of that?
I have a comment to make.
Oh, thank you.
For the applicant. I noticed that your homeowners association has been forfeited, so that may be a recommendation you want to make to the Board of Appeals that the HOA get back in good
Yeah,
standing.
you know, I heard something about that.
Yeah.
And I'd have to go back and ask our chairman, because it was my understanding that our attorney had fixed that, but I don't have any direct knowledge of that at all.
Okay.
Thank you.
If I'm correct, that this is because no one in that subdivision's allowed to have their own dock? Or is, I mean, why is,
It's a community dock.
Do you know that answer? Is the homeowners association restrict docks upon the individual lots?
There is a restriction in the covenants that said that if anybody builds a dock, they lose their slip at the marina. But it's, if you read it, it's so vaguely worded that I don't know what happens to the slip at the marina. There's no way for the association to assume ownership of it because it's deeded to the individual lot owners. Each slip is deeded as an easement to the lot owner. So there have been, but there were 3 slips out on the peninsula, or 3 lots out on the peninsula that already had piers before the lot was built, or almost in concurrence. So there's a lot of discussion, like, what does it mean? Does it mean anything? I don't know. I can't answer that question.
So you're saying you really don't know who owns the pier then?
No, so for instance, on my deed, for my house, for my lot, there's an easement for a certain slip in that marina.
An easement what, that anybody can use it, or
So
what?
that the property owner.
Bill, what was your question?
mine?
Yeah.
Well, I was asking if it was a wildlife staging area, number one, and then if there's something either in the zoning ordinance or in the covenants that include anyone that's a private lot owner from building a pier. I mean, that was the general intent. I always thought of the community pier was that was one pier instead of 18 or 25 piers. Or it was used for anyone that bought an interior lot.
Yeah, I believe under the critical area law, you can have a community pier, but no individual piers. And I think what the applicant's talking about is, you're talking about slip easements at the pier.
That's what we have, yeah, at the pier.
So is there like some kind of lottery, or are there enough slips for all of the owners?
There are 28 slips, and there are 28 lots, or 29 lots. One lot never had a slip deeded to it. It was sold without a slip deed. If that makes sense, if I'm answering your question.
Bill, do you have a comment? Sorry.
I was going to say, my understanding, and I have no problem with the history, is that this is sort of a very old condition, it's rather unusual. The sort of goals that Mr. Crowley is pointing out are absolutely correct, but I think that those goals came possibly after this, so. It's just, it's an unusual situation. One of the most unusual.
Cindy, did I hear you to say that the HOA at Swan Point is defunct?
Right.
So who is then the authorized party to come with the application if the homeowners association is no longer in operation?
Well, it's not that it's not in operation, it's functioning, but they've got to file some personal property returns with SDAT.
In the meantime, are they legally eligible to pursue this application?
I think that that's up to, you all, if you want to consider it or make them wait until they do that. But I think you can make it a condition for the Board of
But
Appeals.
legally, that's a state issue on personal property taxes, because you can still operate it as a homeowners
Right, you
association
can sue,
legally.
you can be sued,
Yeah,
right?
but it's,
Okay.
they need, the state needs their registration legally, but that doesn't mean they can't still act.
Right,
So they're still legally empowered to pursue the application, which is my
Right.
question.
Okay. Of course, we had this before. I'm always a little bit troubled by the practical difficulty being because the water's shallow. And I know you make a case for the SAV, which is important. I just don't, I'm a little with Bill on the depths because, I mean, everyone can come in. We did this one before and the same thing. You said it's getting shallow. Well, that's why we have limits, that some properties are worth more or less because of the water depth. And you just can't keep moving pier lengths out with variances, I think. But you can make if you can make a case as a practical or so for the comp plan that we have improved the SAVs. I don't know that we have, but is that the case you're making? That we've improved the SAVs or increased the number of SAVs?
I don't know if there's been an increase in the area of SAVs. They will not be interfered with in this particular proposed action, because.
But they wouldn't be interfered with if they did nothing, too.
That's true.
Okay. So what's the what is the practical difficulty? They have a pier and they have a length of pier.
Right, I'd probably say that the practical difficulties there accepted would be sedimentation and just decaying condition of the pier itself.
Well, they can repair their pier, though.
Yeah.
I'm looking for, so when we say practical difficulties, there's a practical difficulty. We can't just say it's, I don't know where staff said that's a practical difficulty because sedimentation, that happens everywhere. There may be a practical difficulty, I just don't, I'd like to know what it is, if that's, otherwise, we have no, go ahead, Bill.
I was just saying, for my sort of, just in general, right, variances, there's a variety of things they can be granted on, unusual site layout in the triangular lot, those sort of things, and topographical issues are another one. So to me, the water depth and siltation and the change in the land is actually, I think, would be eligible to be at least considered as a topographical issue, right? It's the land itself has changed.
So we're not stopping them from having a pier or repairing a pier at existing, they're asking for more, they're increasing their nonconformity. I think that's a stiffer burden. I'd like to find a reason, but I don't see that as a precedent setting. I think can be troubling. Now, I think Bill's point to one pier, if they're restricted, I think you can make a great case that you're limiting piers in other areas. That's you're less impactful into the waterway. But I'll listen to anyone's comments.
I just, if the reason the argument is, or the practical difficulty is the sedimentation, then I would like to see what it was in or really in 2000 or 2010, 2015, and what it is today. Honestly, where I'm sitting, it just seems to me like it's hard for the people with the inside slips to maneuver in and out of there. But I want to know that it's more difficult today than it was when the pier was built. Because I'll tell you, 260 feet out, that's quite a length, and then to have another 80 or 90 feet as a T on that, that's a pretty massive structure out there, 260 feet. And at the very least, I think it ought to be some sort of illumination for night on it, The water just gets busier and busier every year.
Right, and I think staff made a comment about they own the land nearby, but the waterways are the public's waterways. So they're impacting that for the general public there.
Well, I'm going to take a different point of view. When the people bought their lots in this subdivision, they were given the benefit of a community pier that offered them certain water depth for going in and out. And what their application says is that it's changed substantially, necessitating the reason for their application. And if that is indeed true, then the condition of the property is the difficulty, quote unquote, where property owners had certain expectations when they bought the property that they would have the ability to freely travel in and out of their assigned slips. And if that's no longer possible, then they have a basis for making the application, as I see it.
But we don't know what that is.
Well, but that's their argument. And that's what they've based their application on, is the change in the water depth. So either we can tell the Board of Appeals that they ought to go verify that, or accept their finding as fact.
We're just making a recommendation. I think if there's facts there, we should have them. I think that's perfect. I've been hurt, I think to Bill's point on
Yeah, I'm
verification.
not sure where to find that fact.
I wouldn't either.
Yeah.
I just think when you have a nonconformity and you're asking for a practical difficulty, that's a high bar.
Okay.
That's my personal opinion, but if someone can verify it, I would say, but
I would have thought it would have been available on the first permit myself, but that was before.
what does you said MDE weighed in on they haven't weighed in on this new pier, just the demolition of the other?
No, MDE has approved what's been proposed, so they have that authorization from MDE and Army Corps of Engineers for what they proposed to construct.
Oh, so there was correspondence for that. I didn't see it.
Yeah, we have permits.
It's related to the building permit, it wasn't related to the variance request. Which is why we wouldn't have considered bringing it forward to you as correspondence.
Yeah, the MDE and the Army Corps of Engineers both granted us permits.
Both?
The Army Corps of Engineers and MDE both granted permits for us.
So they found it acceptable.
Well, they don't have a standard on
They're
pier
not
length.
evaluating it based
Pier
on-
length,
They're evaluating it on other standards.
right.
Well, it just looks to me like when you move it 15 feet, the very most you're picking up's another foot of water on the inboard side. I don't know where that helps at all.
Well, someone would make a motion, we're making a recommendation to the Board of Appeals, and they'll get to present their case there, and maybe I think Cindy's got a good point on making sure they're legally, with the state of Maryland, their homeowner association is registered and paying their fees. And if whatever recommendation we make is that they provide the Board of Appeals with whatever evidence you can get to support this change of sedimentation. But I'll listen to a motion or entertain a motion from someone either way.
I'm going to recommend that we send a favorable recommendation to the Board of Appeals for a variance in the pier length, subject to, after finding that MDE and the Corps of Engineers have found this proposal to be acceptable, that the variance will not cause a substantial detriment to the adjacent or neighboring property, that the variance will not change the character of the neighborhood or district, that the variance is consistent with the comprehensive plan and general intent of the ordinance, that the practical difficulty cited by the applicant is a change in the condition of the property that affects access to the inside section of the pier slips, that the use or development of the property immediately adjacent to the property does not apply in the critical area, and that the practical difficulty or other injustice was not caused by the applicant's own actions. Make this recommendation subject to the homeowners association confirming it has the legal authority to pursue the application and speak for the homeowners, that they agree at their expense to install a standpipe system in accordance with the NFPA 303 per the fire marshal's request, and that that plan be submitted to the fire marshal for review and approval prior to any action being taken. And the third thing was, and that the applicant provide more substantive information to the Board of Appeals regarding the change in the condition of the property over time.
Thank you. We have a motion. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Okay, we got a second each side. Any discussion? I'll call the question. Paul Reeder,
Aye.
Bill Crowdy,
Aye.
Paul Ruby,
Aye.
Jim Saunders, and I'll vote no. So when you have a favorable recommendation to the Board of Appeal, I do think that substantiating, like the motion indicated, that sedimentation would be important.
Right.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much.
Our next item is under general review, is a review of the proposed changes to the Millington Comprehensive Plan.
Good afternoon. Before I start, I just wanted to say I missed my opportunity a little earlier to say that Ray Strong did send an email. I thought it was copied to everyone, but he did send an email yesterday saying he had a schedule conflict and apologized, so.
Thank you for the update.
Yeah, thank you. So the item before you is a courtesy review of the Town of Millington's comprehensive plan. I sent this out to you all early, so you'd have some time to look through it. Town Manager Joe Manning provided a summary of the changes in the plan, and that's included in the packet. I think the sort of in the biggest picture view, their Town of Millington, their desires to sort of reorient the plan. There's some discussion of trying to be more fiscally and utilitarianly oriented, as opposed to, they characterize the previous plan as sort of more of a nostalgic focus. So I think they're trying to reposition their plan. The primary issue that I found that, touched on the county was the idea of the 5-year waiver for zoning when property is annexed into the town. For the 2 annexations that have occurred already, county commissioners have issued a letter that does say that that 5-year time period is waived for the town, as they did that as a courtesy to the town. So that might need to be addressed in their plan. And I met with town manager and also their town planner, and we talked a little about the plan. And this is sort of a working draft. They're moving forward to their meeting on September 28th. So some of the figures you might find may change. And there's still some discussion about how large of an annexation area they want to consider. So again, this is a courtesy review for you all. If there's anything you want to sort of send forward, comments that you'd like to transmit to Town of Millington, we'll prepare a letter if you have anything that you'd like to say, and we'll get that to them before they have their public hearing. So.
Thank you. Is there anyone from the Town of Millington that wants to say anything? Okay. Up here, any comments or questions? The only thing, Bill, that I saw, and I guess it says the annexation change are reflected in public facility projections and tier map changes. The town has extended its annexation plan to include properties west of 301. Do they they don't, you said they're does that, what are they asking for?
When I touch base on that issue, because there's text that talks about that, but none of the maps show it. So I'm not sure they've come to a final conclusion about that, but they're looking, the discussion, my understanding is that they're considering property west of 301 to extend to Mills Creek Branch. the wetland area with the tributary that is west of the site that's for the proposed Everton project. So I believe that they're considering including the proposed Everton area that you all, I think, reviewed at concept plan. That's what the discussion is about. So, and I don't know if they've finalized that, so.
Okay. Is there anyone online or in the public that would like to offer an opinion on the courtesy review of the Millington Comprehensive Plan? Okay. Any thoughts to offer to Millington before we move on?
I was just making way for the public, but yeah.
You can come back. Yeah, I just have a concern about what that means, you know, as far as when they, to get that, what they intend, how far they, you know,
Yeah.
want to go.
Okay.
Anyone else? Okay.
I say, it's their comprehensive plan. Millington's. It's Millington people. Let them decide what they want to do. Right?
Well, they have to respect the people that may not want to be annexed to Millington, too.
Yeah, but I'm saying, I look at it like, I don't live in Millington. I live in King County as a whole. But Millington, they have to make that decision, that community, to make things worthwhile for them. That's the way I look at it. And when they present it back to us, if the community in Milton agree, then I say, I would go and vote, say, move it to the county commission. I don't think that we have, I might be wrong, but the way I look at it, I don't think that we have the right to sit up here and change anything that they had to be.
Well, we're not. It's just a review.
Right.
The only comment I had is that when you annex, that is the county. They're annexing.
I understand.
That was my question. How far did they intend to annex? What are their thoughts on annexation? That's why, I don't know what they are. It's all west of
Well, I don't
301.
know.
You're west of 301, too. They
Yeah.
want to get real big.
But I'm saying, King County is all of us, right? And I understand, people get upset sometimes. The fact is, and I'll break it down to you, people get upset sometimes in this community when they have to do something on a piece of ground they own in King County, and then they have to go through this procedure to get it. It's been like that ever since I've been sitting on this board. And I think that's not right, because the fact is, they own the ground, but they have to pay the tax, so they shouldn't go through all of this stuff to put a building up. You see, I'm just using it for example. And I look at it like, we have comprehensive plan for Millington, Rock Hall, Batterton, and Galena, right? And here,
And one for Kennedyville.
and Kennedyville, right?
No, we don't.
No, not for Kennedyville.
I thought there was
Not for Kennedyville.
no?
There are none of the master plans for unincorporated areas were
No,
adopted.
nothing for Wharton either.
Nothing for Ward, nothing. Those are the corporate areas. And I feel, like I say, I feel my opinion is that they make their own decision and bring it back. And if the county commissioners agree on.
Well, they do, Jim. When it's in the town of Millington, we don't bother. We don't review it at all. But my question is, what's going to become in the town of Millington? That was all the question I had, is what will become Millington? They have in their comp plan of interest in expanding. That's my concern, is how far they're thinking. Well, if they do get it, and they have a waiver, they have the ability to expand, then we'll never review another project in there,
You
once
said
it's in town.
what they, in other words, you're asking, what do they want to do in the,
In the town, we do not review their projects.
right?
They're asking to make their town bigger. That was my question, is how far do they intend? That's all, just a question. I don't know. Maybe
Okay.
very little, I don't,
Okay, I got you.
that was my question, is
Okay.
when you ask, they're asking to expand the town, that's all. We will not review anything they do in the town.
Okay.
What is our, just taking that question a little further, what is our role or the commissioner's role if a town does want to expand and annex property?
If the what?
What is the county's role in any proposal by a town to annex property to expand its borders?
The commissioners have to.
Are you referring to the waiver?
I don't know. I don't know the process.
So the zoning would stay in place unless the county grants a waiver. That's what Bill was talking about previously with the 3 prior annexations. And the purpose of that is to allow the county to make sure that there aren't significant zoning changes that are incompatible with the county's zoning designations. So the county gets to review that and grant a waiver or not.
And then the annexation has to go to the state, then to us, and then the state. Bill, I don't know how that works.
Annexations are basically a town-based process. All of Maryland jurisdictions follow the same process. Our review is part of the larger clearinghouse MDP review. And as Cindy says, really our focus is on the 5-year waiver. And I think the original intent was was if towns are going to significantly upzone properties when they're transferred, it allows counties to have time to provide the infrastructure that might be needed, like schools or, if towns do water, sewer, or roadway. It doesn't allow instant development. So if that's not an issue, then counties can waive that and towns can upzone or rezone however they wish. But that really is a process that involves primarily the town and the state, and we're sort of one of the many review agencies. I mean, we do have the right to object to it. I don't know why we would. And part of the idea of having the comprehensive plans in this courtesy review is each town has its, as you say, growth area, and the county reflects that same growth area or similar in their plan so that it's coordinated. Everybody knows what the long-term desires are and there's no surprises, so. And just so you all know, in this issue, Millington is sort of a special case. Their growth area is rather large. You've seen some of the discussions. They had a charrette with particular property owners, and they're working on a draft annexation plan for those properties, sort of a long-term plan. County's involved in being part of that because we're affected by it. And I think the town would like to work with you all to come up with a way of there being some sort of joint review of projects, because things will be in the county and then they will move to the town at some point, and having some coordination and cooperation between Planning Commission in town and Planning Commission of the county. And we're working on a initial proposal that we can all take a look at and see if we like that. So it's a large growth area. It's sort of the growth area for the county at the moment. So some, extra cooperation is desired by the town, and I think by the county as well. So keep you informed on that.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
I think in the plan that you sent out, and we had a chance to look at, that showed let's say, the overall annexation plan, that's really going to incorporate a fair amount of our 301 corridor that we've been talking about on the east side.
Yes.
I have one question as far as annexation, because I'll be honest, I'm just not that familiar with it. Does anybody get to vote on it outside of the commissioners and the town board, let's say?
So there's
Does the public get the chance to vote for it?
There's a process in Maryland that under certain conditions, different groups can petition to referendum. So it doesn't get voted on without that, but there are sort of safeguards. The county is one of those entities. I believe the general population of the town in certain cases can do so, and people who are being annexed can do so as well. And there's percentages and how many people have to do that. But there is sort of a general vote option if people
'Cause
raise
the
that.
reason I ask is by looking at that annexation plan that was presented, I mean, you're gonna double the size of Millington and probably be almost double if not more, in population. I mean, it covers a lot of developed land that is not in Millington at this point. So once that's all added in, you're gonna literally double the population of Millington. And obviously, within their proposal too, they've looked at increasing the police, increasing trash, all the public services and everything else. That would include the fire departments and everything, which is, it becomes a tremendous, well, obviously, all the people that get annexed, I mean, their taxes are going up, let's be real.
So there's, if I can comment on sort of two sides of that. So that has been the long-term plan in both our comp plan and Town of Millington's comp plan for a long time. I mean, that is the county's designated one of two growth areas, and this is, the growth area that we're working on now. So I don't think that's a surprise. In general, I think Millington is proposing a larger annexation area than just the properties we're talking about, but for that area of growth that we're talking about, Millington Crossing and neighbors, those are all property owners who want to be annexed in, right? That's their goal. So it's a little different than a large area where there's a whole bunch of residents and houses.
Well, that's the reason I was asking, does somebody get the vote on it? I mean, obviously, there's got to be, to me, there would have to be some kind of citizen approval.
Right. So there's sort of two groups of annexations. One is property owners approach a town and ask to be annexed, and that's the most common one. And the other is the town makes a proposal, proposes an area, and a certain amount of voters and property owners have to sort of consent for that to happen. So there is a way that towns can annex properties that have not approached them. But that process is much less common. And I believe the one that we're talking about now for the Millington growth area, all those property owners are interested in being annexed. And I don't know that there's any residents at all on any of those properties. There may be one or two, but they're all, right now, they're all cornfields. Right. This is where the Howard Johnsons used to be, and there may
Well,
be
in that
one or
part,
two
yeah.
residences in there,
That
but it's
part-
mostly vacant land.
Right, that part farther out, but
Or
along.
ag land, not vacant.
Along the river and stuff like that, there are.
Right, those are
problems.
larger areas, but we haven't talked about how that's gonna come into town. That's more of a town issue. So the town may have something to say about that, but we've really been just talking about the potential development areas.
But the map that they presented
Is much
doesn't
larger.
identify that, it's much larger.
Yes, and that's
And that's
their
what-
overall long-term growth plan.
Right.
Yep.
Bill, I just flipped through that thing, and I didn't see it in there, but most comprehensive plans have in there that, for that proposed infrastructure and stuff, that the developers will pay their fair share, and I didn't see that in there, and we're getting ready to spend, the county, talking about taking over the sewer and water up there.
Right.
That probably 20 million gets thrown into the overall debt, and everyone in the county pays on that debt through their sewer and water, and the money comes out of the general fund to match shortfalls in it. There's a 4% increase per year until they get the debt paid down. So, I mean, I can't see a citizen in Fairleigh or on a farm or in a house down Tallchester Estates having to foot the bill for this massive amount of infrastructure that's going to be going in up there. I think that, there ought to be some safeguard in their comp plan, as there is in ours, that if you're going to put in a 100-lot subdivision, you're going to pay your fair share of putting in that infrastructure, and we don't get stuck like up in the village of Kennedyville where we've got 20-some houses up there and not one sewer allocation bought.
I think in our planning of it, well, we wouldn't see some of it, but I'd say where I come from, the developer would be responsible for any increase in infrastructure.
I haven't been here for quite a while.
And then the people that live there would obviously pay for that increase, their fair share of the increase, you know, they pay for it either by bond and then paying back in their monthly bill, however they do it, but there is no impact on the rest of, there would be no impact on the rest of the county, it's just an impact on the people that live there and on the developer. I mean, granted, it would be, maybe the price of the property goes up a little bit, but that's, I have to say, it's the cost of doing business. I mean, they pay for the sewer if needed, they pay for the water, they pay for the roads have to meet a certain standard. It would have to meet county standards if we had, you know, the county has road standards, you know, they would, all of that has to be done, and that would be done by any developer that would go ahead and do it. I mean, you know, there should not be really any cost outside of the area that's being developed.
Mr. Chair, may I annotate this conversation? So, I don't know what else to call it, sort of just add some more information. So, Vice Chair Ruge, you are correct in the process as envisioned and executed in most places. And Mr. Crowding, you are correct because the process here is a little different. So, our revenue funds are not self-sustaining. They are subsidized. So, water and sewer is supported by general taxes, which is very, very unusual, right? Most water and sewer systems are a revenue fund, they're separate, or an enterprise fund, they're separate from general taxes.
Yeah.
Ours are subsidized. So part of the goal of growth, in our case, is actually to reduce the amount of subsidy required.
Correct.
And so that's how these projects are, you know, Public Works is very, very cautious and conservative about how to move forward. There's allocation fees that are fairly significant for every new house. There's vacant lot fees, so if you're in the district and you don't take advantage of it, you still pay for part of the system. So there are parts and pieces in place, but we are in an unusual situation. That's not, where we are is partially because of size, partially because of issues where projects were done many years ago and growth didn't come, and so that was not realized. So you are both correct, but there's just sort of a different light, if
Well,
that's
I think
helpful.
too that we need to hear what the community has to say. And they have a meeting on September 27th?
Because the public hearing for their
It's a
comprehensive plan.
Public hearing then.
And Town of Millington will, I mean, they'll hold a public hearing. They're sort of responsible for managing their public
I
input.
will say, if I can, I'm going to try to get there because I want to hear what the public has to say about it. I mean, that's my intention. Can't guarantee it, but I'd like to be there.
Any other comments that Bill can pass on to Millington? Thank you. Our next item, the proposed draft land use ordinance review.
This we did an introduction last time, sort of went over the highs and the new part, and you all spoke about focusing on the process chapter and maybe laying out a plan for the future about how you would like to cover this. Last night, the Agriculture Advisory Commission met and took their sort of first look through it, and we talked about, you know, they'll have some recommendations in the future. They're going to be meeting at the end of October, so when you all come up with a schedule, whatever time that is, you might want to put agriculture at least in November, so that it's past the time and you'll have the benefit of Agriculture Advisory Commission's advice. And they may take more than one meeting, so, but we'll keep you informed about that. We want to sort of run this process in parallel, make sure you get the information that you need and that, you know, nobody's rushed, but that also by doing it in parallel, you guys can cover a lot of issues that are not ag issues and, you know, kind of time those things to mesh, just like you all did as part of the task force. That was the same sort of process.
Lord, they are in trouble.
So will you provide us with periodic updates on what the ag group has adopted?
Yep.
Okay, great.
How do you envision we proceed with the review?
If you all can walk through line by line, my goal is to take notes and understand your desires and instructions, and we'll craft a sort of master recommendation based on that at the end for you to adopt and send forward. You can do it sort of in general, you can do it page number, line number. Well, we don't have line
We're
numbers.
starting on the general processes, right?
That was my understanding, that was the desired area you wanted to start at, but this is your review. You really can proceed as you wish.
Okay. if we start on the processes, that's what we, Article 4, page 143. Statement of intent has been revised, and the references to village master plan, and in your memo, you see what else, some of the minor things, but. So does anyone have any problem with the initial statement of intents and objectives?
No, but I do have a general comment that addresses an item that's been deleted from section 4 in general, as I read the changes. In the original draft, and this ties into our conversation about towns versus county. In the original draft, the language in numerous areas in section 4 talks about being sensitive to the comprehensive plan, the county plan being sensitive and considerate of town plans. And that caveat has been deleted from the new draft. And I'm concerned about that because, I mean, I think it's appropriate for us to have a robust dialogue between the county and the town, and that the land ordinance should recognize that. That's my view. So I'm concerned about taking that out, and I'd be curious to know the rationale behind that.
I'm actually not aware of that deletion. There were multiple places where the same sets of goals and objectives were repeated over and over and over again, and those have been moved up to the front under the statement of intent. The next section is goals and objectives. Those are the same as they were, and they're basically being applied to everything that follows as sort of general provisions. But I mean,
There was specific, unfortunately, I grabbed the wrong package when I left. Does anyone have section 4? Do you have a copy with you?
I think Bill has one right here, we can certainly.
sure. Oh, sorry. It's actually a strike through?
Yeah.
Okay.
It's in the blue. Let's see.
We did remove references
It says,
to.
and where applicable, the village master plan,
Correct, because,
and where applicable, the village
Right.
master plan.
and
that
those,
sort of thing.
the village master plans have been stricken because originally, the intention was, and Carla was here, not I, but my understanding is that there were a series of village master plans that are actually on our website. They're very well done. They were for the different unincorporated villages, but that at the time of that project, county commissioners chose not to adopt them. So they aren't adopted documents. So to hold people to documents that are essentially drafts, we felt was unfair. So that language has been removed. But those are specifically plans for unincorporated villages that the county chose not to adopt.
Not to recognize. Okay.
Thank you. No, that helps
I
me because
understand the clarification.
Okay, perfect.
I thought that they also applied to the master plans for the towns.
And I believe even the language referring to village master plans is no longer in the comprehensive plan.
Okay.
I'm sorry?
I believe that the current comprehensive plan no longer refers to doing village master plans. It was something that had been, I know it was in like the 1996 comprehensive plan, and I think it may have been in the one after that, where there was a goal and a strategy to develop these village master plans,
And that's been,
and that's been
And
removed.
when they were developed, too. We did develop them, we just didn't approve
They
them.
were developed, and the county commissioners chose to not adopt them, and so when they made it very clear that they did not want to adopt them, I think that's when it came out of the next comprehensive plan.
understood. Okay, thank you.
As we move through, we've added comments related to the critical area review, which are required. References to technical advisory committee. The posting, initial process for that, advertisements changed a little bit.
that some of those changes are related to it. We discussed in the task force and with you all, there were a variety of lengths of notice periods. And so those have all been standardized so that all projects have the same notice period. I mean, like, as opposed to 20 days, 15 days, 10 days, 12, it's the same period. And that period ties into the existing cycle of technical advisory committee, planning commission meetings. So now there's a monthly TAC, and as you are aware, a monthly planning commission and a monthly board of appeals. And the idea is that if you go to TAC and you have everything that you need ready, then everything is timed so that letters and ads can go out so that you will be on the next planning commission meeting and the next board of appeals. And previously, with all the different deadlines for all the different meetings and types of meetings, people would often have to, not often, but sometimes had to wait a month just because of the number of days for a deadline. So this is meant to be a single coordinated system. So,
The letters you send out the letters, the planning?
yes.
I'm
I think
just,
the only exception is citizen participation plan.
Correct.
Right. So citizen participation plan, the developer sends the letters. That's a different process. But for hearings before you all, staff
for
send those
general,
letters.
for John, it's sent out by the planning, okay.
Yes.
I just wasn't sure, and on several reviews we've done, it appeared that the applicant was the one sending out the letters, and
If it's related to their citizen participation plan, then they did, just for that point, but not for your hearings. When they have, so citizen participation plan meetings are held by the developer prior to application and prior to coming before this board
Right.
to solicit citizen input. They do the advertising, they set up the meeting, they report back on it to you. Your meetings are also noticed and advertised. Staff does the notices for your meetings and Board of Appeals. Did I miss anything?
do we have the opportunity to attend those citizen participation meetings?
I think,
Are we ever
I
given
don't
a
see any
notice as to
reason
when
why
they
you
are?
would not, but generally, the notices are sent to people who live within the area of, or surrounding the development. So if it's one of those, if a proposal was near where you live and you got a letter, I think
The only reason I ask is, there's times too, like comes down the time of our meeting and whatever, we're in the middle of the afternoon, and there's a lot of people that can't attend. They're working and whatever, and it gets to be very difficult. And maybe this is just, I'm just looking at another way of hearing some citizen input on, projects that might affect them.
if you wouldn't mind me just making a comment, and this is not a legal comment, you have someone who can give you that, but, for things like this, I mean, theoretically, right, I personally could attend as well for information. But when someone official from the county, right, a staff member, planning commission member, shows up at one of these meetings, I feel like that may send a message, it may confuse communication. The idea is those meetings are in preparation for this, for your sitting to review a project. The idea is that before it ever comes to you, citizens can comment to the developer, and they may modify the proposal or project before they come to you based on what the community has said. And although I don't know, legally if there's any reason that precludes you from going, I think the message that it might send could be confusing. So that's just my personal opinion, so, if that helps. Certainly, the developer is supposed to report out to you with a summary of the meeting, so you know what the public said. And if they made changes based on that, they're supposed to report, and this is what we did in response to that. So, I hope that's helpful.
Thank you.
Bill, in combinations in minor project, where the concept, preliminary, and final are combined and with approval of the planning director for minor projects, what are your standards for minor? I know we have minor subdivisions and major subdivisions, but for projects, what does minor mean?
Yes.
And I know this was put in with intent to expedite projects that are not possibly, or
On page 166,
We don't have that, though.
you don't have page 160? Oh, sorry. I can bring it up.
So it's the site plan, right?
Right.
So minor subdivisions are 7 or fewer lots.
I understand, I'm talking about, it says in combination, it says in our notes here, minor projects have, I didn't know what,
Right.
says subdivision, I understand, but minor projects have less impact. Is that minor, or does that mean to say minor
It's both minor subdivisions and minor
Oh,
site
okay.
plans.
Well, I thought-
It's
okay, I
meant to be
didn't-
speaking about them together.
Very good, okay, I
As a
didn't,
category, sorry.
okay, that's
Now-
fine.
now I understand.
Minor subdivision, though, could be 7 lots and a private road, and it would never come before us.
That's correct.
Correct.
Well, it is subject to your review and approval, correct? And if you have questions, you can refer it to us.
Correct. And in fact, for our two processes, minor review and major review is the same review, the same standards. It's the venue of review that changes, whether it's with staff or it's with this body. And as I think you're aware, you know, the planning staff, we have the ability to bring people before you, even if they qualify for a minor. If we feel it would be better reviewed by you, then we bring it to you. For example, the animal shelter, we did that. There's a few other things that when they come, the project's just too important. Even if they meet the standards of a minor review physically, it, to me, doesn't seem appropriate for certain kinds of projects not to have you as the venue, right? So we have the option to sort of elevate things at any time, and we try to. I mean, from my point of view, minor projects really should be about something that does not have a lot of impact, meets the standards, and, you know, people adding an outbuilding on a property, that would be a minor project. People changing something that, you know, is in a project that has community value or it's high profile, I think any change like that should be coming before you, so. Hence the cat building that you saw.
Well, can you explain the section on waivers?
So there is currently a waivers section. And in the big picture throughout the code, and Carla's more familiar with sort of the past history of the code, there were a variety of things where the term waived was used. And then there was a waivers section with certain things that can be waived by the planning commission. So in sort of the streamlining the process commission, I went through and removed the term waiver anywhere it appears, except for actual waivers that are granted under the waivers section. And the different waivers in the code have been put together. So there's things that, stormwater management waivers, erosion sediment control waiver, I have to get to the page to give you all of them. But the idea was putting them all together in the same place, having it be the same category, and that waivers are things that have a standard that you are waiving versus things that are alternate compliance, design-oriented changes, which really don't need a waiver process, that's something that can be done handled in a different way. So
That would be handled as a variance.
No, variances are another category. Variances are a category where there is a dimensional, for one example, standard in the code that for some reason a property is unusually shaped, or topography is different, and it cannot meet the requirements of the code. And so there's a reason to set aside that rule for that particular property. Alternative compliance, the idea is that, you know, there's some kind of design standard, and that design standard can be flexible, and this body can accept an alternative design in place of the design, but it's not a dimensional standard, it's not a setback, et cetera. And then the waivers are very specific things that fall into narrow categories that you all would have the ability to waive, and it's, so curb cuts in the employment center, data processing center design, subdivisions on private roads, and parking lot design. Those have been lumped together on criteria, and then there's a series of stormwater management criteria, stormwater management waivers, and those are based on the model code from Maryland that we utilize.
I think a really good example, and sitting here looking at this, between the two types of things would be with the solar standards, where there's a provision that you can do bigger landscaping or a berm. So it's not really waiving, it's kind of one or the other. I think that's something that's not a waiver, whereas parking lot design, private roads, curb cuts, those are things that are specifically called out to be waived by the planning commission. Is that kind of?
Yes.
Do we have, or like with the berms, because that just came up at the last meeting.
It did, yes.
Do we have a size? I mean, do we have an idea of what the base is supposed to be and what the height is supposed to be and the top width is supposed to be? Because my idea of a berm is definitely not what a developer's idea of a berm is.
Right, so the berm has a height, and the landscaping corridor has a width. But within that,
Right.
I think it's proposed on how the soil works. more than
That's what I was
anything
going to
else.
say. I'd say that
Yeah.
the width of, and the slope of the berms would be dependent upon whatever sediment control regulations require. I know that there are limits on the slope you can have, at certain heights and whatnot, so that's probably how that would be designed.
And if I can toss in one more thing about waivers, throughout this entire project, one of the sort of signal things that we've tried to keep in mind is preserving those processes and parts and pieces of the code that everyone is familiar with. So these waivers are things that are already in the code. They're reorganized, I believe, but they're all things that already exist sprinkled about. And again, just like with the matrices, the uses in the code, trying to preserve the things that are now in the code that people are familiar with. They recognize the name of their use. They may recognize a waiver they made use of. And those things are preserved, although reorganized, streamlined, repackaged. Things are called out that are new, but the goal is that the content, the substance of the code is preserved primarily, right? That this is a wayfinding exercise, a streamlining exercise, but not a major overhaul of content itself. Content and the sort of history of the code and uses and processes that people would recognize are preserved.
Thank you. And I guess I don't remember that discussion at the task force, but the recommendation was to increase the site plan expiration to 2 years.
So that is something that in our daily operations has become a real issue with people because of the availability of construction materials and COVID. So we've been granting longer periods, so that's been incorporated. And some of those things, in that, what I call the biggest 3 words that we were instructed was streamline the process. Those 3 simple words were the most amount of work. But we've tried to incorporate things that have come up along the way that are daily practices so that the code reflects that. So, and
Right.
those are in red because they are not
Yeah, I
language
don't
that
have a problem.
appeared before.
Right, I didn't
Yeah.
remember that discussion.
Right.
Not that I remember a lot of it, right?
We've had a lot of people have to return within a year and get
Oh, I
an
agree.
extension.
We
So,
have I think it, puts and we had the last one, what we reviewed, and people had complainants for a project that was already approved, and it puts a bad taste in, that they already have gotten approval, it's just, so. What else, any major? Please weigh in, everyone, if any areas.
I've got a couple of
Yeah.
them. The setbacks for accessory structures are increased.
Yes.
What do we do about the ones that were just built yesterday that are conforming? Suddenly, we're getting ready to throw a ton of stuff as non-conforming. Is there going to be some procedure there for, if I want to add on to a shed that I built 3 feet off my boundary line that now's a non-conforming structure? I've seen them come before this board where that was it. You were done. You couldn't expand it or anything, and we had ran into one of those a few years ago up at Kentmore Park. He had a house that was built according to whatever zoning was in place or there wasn't zoning in place. And he was stuck with what he had, and at that time, the attorney said, the theory behind non-conforming structures are they eventually disappear. And,
That is the theory, yes,
when we
sir.
change it, and
the
while we're
idea.
talking about that, the 3 foot, I'm in favor of 3 feet, but we've got houses that are built just yesterday that are the 2 foot, which is required. And we have had houses that had to be jacked up about 1.5 inches to comply with the 2 foot that were built 1 foot, 10.5 inches higher than they needed to be at one time. And it's, I just think, if you're going to do that, there's got to be some sort of grandfathering in there, because you just limited the fellow that built that house yesterday at what's required, that if he wants to do any additions, he can only do 50% of it, or he's going to have to step up
all that
That's
sounds
something that, you know,
absolutely
you
correct.
gotta think about, because that's, we're not talking about $40,000 home, we're talking about $1 million homes.
So in both of those cases, the accessory structure setback changes and the freeboard, both the task force and this body recommended that those be incorporated, and so they have been.
I don't think we put much thought into it, because I'll tell you, that's a pretty big nut to crack if you just build a house. And you know, you're saying, well, they should be raising it a foot. On a 30 by 40, that isn't much, but some of these homes, that's quite inexpensive.
And I would say, I think the issues, I mean, I'm not arguing with you, but I'm just saying, I think the
You are arguing
issues,
with me.
the issues that
I hear
motivated
that at
those,
home all the time.
the issues that motivated those two particular changes, I think, are fairly significant issues in any zoning code, right? The setbacks for accessory structures are, you know, increasing them is motivated by what the neighbor's life is like. What do they experience on, you know, on the other side of that property line? And for the freeboard issue, I mean, I think FEMA has strongly recommended that communities raise their freeboard. Our hazard mitigation plan recommends us. There's multiple plans across the Eastern Shore and in the county that recommend that freeboard be raised. And that's really a life safety issue, right? And a property damage issue when flooding occurs. So I'm not disagreeing with you that those changes affect people, but I think in these two cases, there's strong arguments for why those are good changes to make. So, and if you all want to walk through the what we call nonconformities here and sort of change how nonconformities work, that's absolutely a discussion we can have. I'm going to really heavily rely on counsel for that, because nonconformities in Maryland have lots of case law, so that's complicated. But we can certainly, you know, it doesn't have to be 50%. We could suggest something else. So, and perhaps if that's a big concern for the commission, perhaps one of our days that you're reviewing it, we just focus on nonconformities and how the changes that are being proposed would affect folks in the future. That's a very valid statement.
Just to stay on, processes for, because so we can allow the public to comment
Sure.
if they choose.
Yes, sir.
In historic preservation, what changes were there?
I think those changes were very slight. So there's additional, we're on, for folks who are following on the track changes version, we're on page 210. There was language added to clarify what sorts of information the department would use to determine if a structure meets the definition of historic structure, and that the addition there talks about public information readily available in the public record, et cetera, as opposed to trying to hire an expert to do that, right? There are dates in the record about when things, you can make some conclusions about when things were built based on commonly available public records. Under subsection B sub 2, this clarifies that the planning department would work in consultation with the chair of the commission, so that that decisions in that subsection are made with the advice of the chair or the chair's designee. And there's a highlighted yellow note specifically, when folks come to appeal decisions that are made in this area, if the decision is a mixed decision with both the department and the board, the Historic Preservation Commission, those appeals go to two different bodies. So the idea of this language was to make a single entity the responsible party in consultation with another party so that appeals would be clear. The concern was there that if a board and the staff are making a decision together, then the venues for appeals would be two different bodies. So I think I just said that. Anyway, that's what that's about. So it's really for clarification. And I wanted to clearly point out that you all, it can be either staff is the one making the determination with input by the board, or the board makes the determination with input by staff, but not to have it be a dual decision. So.
Thank you. That's all, Article 4 was the processes. Did you have any things you would like to, in your reading of it, comment on?
As you might not be surprised. I took a little more granular review of it and have some comments, which, you know, I could start going through some of them now, or maybe the better way forward would be to do a memo, setting out the different changes I thought might be warranted that you could then look at, see on paper, or I can go through a couple of them now.
Can you go through one just to give us an idea of what?
Sure, okay, so I guess one of the major ones that I saw was in the goals and objectives, which it's great that we have eliminated the repetition in the older zoning ordinance where the standards are repeated over and over again. And I reviewed both site plan and subdivision sections. And you may remember a while back, I provided you with those sections of the zoning ordinance and noted where there were differences between the standards. That's the one thing that I saw, was that there were some objectives omitted with respect to subdivision review, and then one also with respect to site plan review. And I wasn't sure what the reason was for that. So for example, for site plan, former site plan review included an objective, which was the former J under site plan review. And what's missing there is the applicant's efforts to design the development in conformance that complements the environment. Where is it? I'm trying to look for it right now. There it is. So if you want to just jot this down, in the current zoning ordinance on pages 333 to 334, there is a finding that's to be made, that's noted J. So for site plan review, the Planning Commission would look at the applicant's efforts to design the development to complement and enhance the rural and historic nature of the county, including incorporating into the project forms and materials that reflect the traditional construction patterns of neighboring communities. That's kind of wordy, but it's missing from the objectives. And maybe there was a good reason for that. I mean, I thought that was a flaw in the current zoning ordinance, that there were such differences between the two review processes. But, you know, does that belong back in there with respect to reviewing both site plans and subdivisions? Because these standards are for both of those processes. And then similarly, under the subdivision review, Objective D wasn't included, Objective G wasn't included, and Objective J wasn't included in the Planning Commission's review of subdivision. And that's because I think they're specific to site plans.
There was an attempt to not have, right, there was duplication that didn't make sense, so that is I believe, the reason. The environmental historical thing, we will add that back if that didn't get moved somewhere. That's a good catch, thank you.
Well, the other isn't a duplication. I think it just was not included in the subdivision review standards because they really pertain to site plans. So for example, D, which is off-street loading and unloading of vehicles incidental to the normal operation of the establishment. So that wouldn't be something you'd look at for subdivision. So I don't know if you want to maybe note that as an exception in subdivision review.
Right, I remember the discussion you had about those things, that they're originally in the code, the lists were identical for both processes, but they included things that when you separated the list didn't make sense for each individual process. Now, the idea of historical and preservation aspects, I'm gonna need to sort of track that down a little bit. But that may be a cut and paste error, because that certainly is a value we want to have, unless it ended up going somewhere else, but I'll have to track that down.
And I can email you those highlighted areas that I had done before,
yeah.
because it's really clear in there. And then, let's see, there were several instances where the words shall were changed to will that I thought it should not have been the case. On page 147, which is section B, regarding preliminary review, where the planning commission can approve with conditions, or disapprove a preliminary project. Conditional approval of the preliminary project will include a complete list and clear explanation of conditions. So there's a lot of controversy, or maybe not controversy, but there's been commentary and an effort to simplify legalese. And one of the issues is whether you should use shall or will. Shall really, having looked it up and reviewed this before the meeting, really suggests a duty to do something. And that's what you have here is the Planning Commission, is a duty to include a list and a clear explanation of conditions. And you should use shall when the use of will more or less connotates something that's going to happen in the future. So my preference would be that, especially in this particular instance, that shall be the verb that's used, because you're a public body making decisions on behalf of the public, and I think it more suggests a duty that you have to list clearly conditions on an approval. And there are still, I think, almost 300 instances of shall in the draft land use ordinance. So that's why I thought, why are we eliminating it there in particular? So just, that would be my suggestion, would be to look at the approval pieces of the process and make sure that it's shall is the word that's used versus will. Let's see. Another change that I thought may be warranted is on page 148, section 1.8, that's titled Decisions by the Planning Commission. I think maybe that should go on page 146, under section 1.7, before number 2, as the title of number 2, or a subtitle that would go, so you would have section 1.7.2, then decisions by the Planning Commission. Because all of those provisions really pertain and address to the decisions the Planning Commission's going to make. 1.8 is really more requirements for the submissions, the final submissions of the plat or the subdivision plan after a final approval. So I just thought that heading was confusing.
So it's the name of 1.8.
Mm-hmm.
Got it.
And I thought where you cite requirements of the state of Maryland, where you can to cite the actual code section, if there is one, would be helpful. On appeals, page 152, I saw that you removed the review of the Planning Commission. Where is that? Which was appropriate.
You're saying that
So-
removal was appropriate?
Yeah, so in the old section, I keep saying old, the current land use ordinance, where there's a minor subdivision and a person is aggrieved by the decision of the planning director on a minor subdivision, that appeal would go to the Kent County Planning Commission. And here in number 3, it basically means that if there's a person aggrieved by a decision of the planning director on a minor subdivision, it will go to the Board of Appeals. And I think that's actually more appropriate. We don't really have appeal procedures. I don't think you've ever done an appeal of a minor subdivision, so that was good. Yeah. And then number 4 should probably not be number 4 and just go as the last sentence in number 3, because I think that's what you intended, that those, I'm not sure what number 4 is really included.
That one as well.
4, because any of those, I mean, the circuit court is, we're not going to prescribe that the circuit court proceeding is public. It is public. So, yeah, I'm not sure what you meant by that.
So so the circuit court, that would not, yeah, that makes sense to put it on to 3. The purpose of the sentence itself was when the county is doing an appeal, right, we have 2 processes. We have something called a public hearing and something we have called a public meeting. So this was just clarifying, use the public meeting process, not the public hearing process. But I agree, it should be part of 3 because it wouldn't apply to the 2 above. That makes sense.
Or maybe not even 3, because the County Board of Appeals, that's always a public meeting.
That's always, no, I think that's always a public hearing.
Right, so you wouldn't want to say it's a public meeting. I mean, they're all open to the public
Right, and
Right.
all the meetings, regardless, right? It has to do with
for the
notice.
County Board of Appeals,
As
so
soon as- Well, we'll look into that, so that's easy enough to
maybe
strike.
it doesn't even need to be in there at all.
Oh, I shouldn't be doing that, yes. So strike 3, 4, thank you, strike 4. Perfect. Thank you.
Sure. What was the other? Okay, and we've talked about this before in here, and that is, now I've jumped to special exceptions. Whether, and that's another area, the criteria for granting special exceptions, where I think we should go back to shall and not will as far as the findings that need to be made. And of course, it's the Board of Appeals that would be doing that, or the planning director. Is whether you want to have a provision in the zoning ordinance that specifies, that addresses amendments to a special exception approval. I think there are some instances where a special exception does address a change, and I'd have to go back through all those uses again, but as far as the process, it seems to me where there's a change in the use that was previously granted as a special exception, that would be an amendment that would be reviewed by the Board of Appeals and not the Planning Commission. So,
What page are we on?
192.
Thanks.
I mean, there's nothing there about that, so, but that's
Because
where
it's
I
also-
think it
you
might
had
want to
a
go.
There is a sentence under section 1.14,
1.14?
under the general amendments, that says, special exceptions, the procedure for amendment shall follow the partial process above. And I question that.
Carla,
I'm not in,
151.
yeah, I'm in a different version, but section number 114, amendments, number
Right.
5. So I think you did try to include something, but it might need. Yeah, I guess my thought was why it wouldn't be handled like variances.
So the point of creating what's called a partial process is that currently, things that want to have amendments have to be treated as though they were brand-new applications. And I sort of wanted to create a sort of a halfway place. I can imagine, think of some of the large projects that require a special exception. It's a whole complex, there's multiple buildings, and they want to come in and make a change to a single building, right? Having a partial would allow them to sort of break off a piece like a phase or et cetera, some part that can be revised without having to start from scratch and justify and apply for the entire project. It just seemed to me that our options are sort of all or nothing, and this would allow that, there would be sort of a way of breaking off a piece that's a change and having that be reviewed on its own, still in the context of the rest, but applicants don't have to prove from scratch that the rest of the special exception is valid because it's a change to just one component. That's what I was thinking of in introducing that idea of a
So are
partial.
you suggesting that remain the purview of this commission to review and decide on?
You can, I'll say something after. I was gonna say, I think it depends on what it is that's being appealed from, or amended from a special exception.
Right. It would still go back through its normal process, but so if it's a special exception that would be administrative, it would do that process. If it was a special exception that required Planning Commission and Board of Appeals review, it would do that process. If it were a special exception that only required Board of Appeals, it would do that process. But the idea being that it just, at least the intent is to create some category where the entire project, the entire use, the entire property doesn't have to start from scratch to justify its existence, that changes can be entertained on a portion of a project and the rest is still considered valid, and whether that piece is approved or not approved, it goes through the same process, but its rejection wouldn't then compromise the entire validity of the rest of the special exception, and that staff would have the ability to say whether or not a project could go through a process as a partial. So I mean, we can think about it. I just thought that the all or nothing approach kind of presented difficulties for folks who just want to make adjustments to their project, you know.
I
Add a
think that
piece.
makes a lot of sense.
So
I think it's wise.
maybe there's better language to express that, and
Yeah, I mean, I
that was the
feel
goal.
like it's a little bit fuzzy,
It may well be.
in terms of what it means to be partial. And then, so there's a decision that it's made that it's a partial change, but then the revised portion still goes either forward as a major or minor amendment. So
Depending on
there's
how
a
it was
decision
originally
there
approved.
too, yeah.
Right.
And if it's major on a special exception, then it should go probably to the Board of Appeals. I just feel like it's a little fuzzy.
Oh, I'm going to ask, we have people in the audience, and
Yeah.
I have, and maybe there's someone on the phone. Do you have any comments about the processes portion of the revised draft land use ordinance? This is only on the process, Article 4. Okay, that's just want to make sure we didn't miss any other comments. Thank you. Now, I'm sorry, interrupted you, Cindy. Any more you had? Or do you want to put all that in the, a memo to?
A brief memo?
Yeah.
With comments, that might be more efficient.
Yeah, so
Unless you, I mean, do you think you're going to keep reviewing 4?
I was going to ask staff and the commission, we can continue, we'll keep it.
I mean, in another session, or do you want to
Oh,
finish it
I think
up
we're going to
today?
have to come back to it after that, between those items. But I think we were contemplating just doing section 4 today. And then when we get to the zoning districts, and I think we should decide what to do if we're going to do it at the next meeting, which ones we all, and notify, certainly the people that had, whatever emails you had for you're
List
interested in,
to
Mark.
push out to
Yeah,
people,
thank
right.
you, appreciate that. But I don't know if there's anything else in Article 4 or the processes. Just say, then,
And these, I mean, I looked very closely because, you know, your decisions that you make are based on the processes, the requirements for the processes. And so you could have appeals. The decisions you make could be appealed. So I just thought it was important to look closely at that in terms of
and basically,
what
we're not.
changes there are and
Yeah.
what decision standards you're going to be reviewing. I think I covered most of them.
Staff, can you explain types of subdivision 241D that was added? Page 1,
241D.
Yes.
Aha, yes, indeed. So I will let Carla explain it, and I will tell you why it's there if you will indulge me. So during the task force discussion of the 10% rule, it was explained that there has been a long-standing policy, actually since the original adoption of the 10% rule, that subdivisions at a certain point, the 10% rule was applied based on its adoption date as opposed to other subdivisions, and I'll let Carl explain that. But that was I want to call it an interpretation, but I don't want to, because I wasn't here when that happened, but that was an approach the department has taken to the 10% rule since the beginning that is not in writing anywhere. And I think we, over time at least, and it was, I think, my first week here, a surveyor was very, very surprised to learn that, well, what do you mean it doesn't apply in this case? And that was the long-standing interpretation, policy, approach, however the department took. The idea was to put it in writing, which I think we did when we were discussing the waiver process for the 10% rule. And then this is carried over, because this is actually what happens, but until this is actually appears in the code, people may or may not be aware of this is how the 10% rule is applied. And now the actual how you apply it, I think Carl does a much better job than I can do of saying what happens. So someone comes in and the 10% rule applies to their property.
If they've done a subdivision since August 19th, 2003. So if you come in, if your property has been involved in a subdivision since August 9th, 2003, the 10% rule applies, whether you're doing another subdivision or doing an adjustment of lot lines. If your property has not been the subject of any kind of subdivision, then you come in for a lot line adjustment, then the 10% rule does not apply. And so this, and I think it's been implemented this way so that the 10% rule couldn't be abused, and that, well, I'm going to create I've got 100 acres, I've taken off my, 10-acre lot, I've used up my 10%. Well, now I really want it to be 50 so I can do an adjustment of lot lines. And so, which doesn't meet the intent of the 10% rule. So that's why those changes that happen after a subdivision has occurred, the 10% rule would apply. And like I said, it just was long-standing practice that if there hadn't been any action, it wouldn't.
okay, thank you.
What about intra-family transfers? Is there something that,
So that's a critical area only issue, correct?
Okay.
And AZD is the only district with the 10% rule. So those
Correct.
two conditions wouldn't cross each other.
okay.
They'd be mutually exclusive concepts.
Because it involves the lot line adjustments, can you talk about the definition of a subdivision, what was taken out and why? On definitions 376.
Thank you.
I just, because we were talking about subdivision, I just wanted, I was curious about when they talked about lot lines.
Okay, so without having a digital search in front of me, there's a couple of places in the definitions where the definition includes regulations within the definition. So those have been removed and transferred to the part of the code that actually has regulations. So this is deleted from the subdivision, and I can find, but the idea was to put it in regulations because it's not really a definition, it's,
Gotcha. Thank you.
yeah.
Cindy's going to amend or offer edits and amendments to us all for this processes. I love opinions on moving forward now that we have the marked up the red line changes. Do we want to proceed at regular meetings and say that we're going to do, I think Bill made a good point, let the Ag Advisory submit their review of ag first, but do we want to take, and that would probably also be RCD, I guess, because it's on the same way, but do we want to go into employment center and pick a couple sections and say that's what we're going to go over at the next meeting, or do you feel the need to, I mean, I don't know if you have other meetings, how you have to announce, so maybe, what's the requirement on special meetings, the announcements of those?
I believe under the Open Meetings Act, you have to give at least 24 hours notice, but we always do much better than that.
Yeah, okay, it's not, you don't have to advertise in the paper or 3 weeks or anything like that?
No, we'll do the same process we do for these meetings. An agenda will be posted on our website. You know, items are advertised based on the item, not the meeting itself.
Right.
So if you have an item that requires an advertisement, that's placed. But for this is an advisory function, so we would just, post the meeting. It will go out in the email to interested parties
Sure,
for
okay. I
the
just make
rezoning
sure
process,
the legal
but I don't
part.
think there's anything beyond that posting.
What are your thoughts on the October meeting as far as its agenda? Do you have an idea what it could look like?
I'm looking over at
Right.
Campbell.
So-
There's a lot of things that are in the works that the applicants have pushed on and on, so the Gillespie is out there.
It will be on the agenda.
Well, we don't know, potential items are Gillespie, the Everton Industrial, the
Next
Shop
one.
tank.
Miller,
Yeah.
What was that one? I didn't hear that.
Chop Tank Final Site Plan,
What did you said the milk?
Miller,
There's a variance that we know is going in October. They have already gone to TAC, I don't know, June or July, and they had conflicts and
okay.
asked to go.
Would you say that 2 sections would be plenty to do at a meeting, or 1? I mean,
Probably depends on the section. Some of them are longer
Yeah,
than
I mean,
others. I think uses probably needs a pretty good discussion if you all want to make changes.
But I think that should come after AAC has kind of looked at it.
I agree. Good point.
So,
Well, I'm not looking for any special meeting. I just want to move the process along. And I don't particularly like meetings going into the night when this is at the end and it needs lots of thought or comment.
you could consider.
And I think the issue of sort of predicting what's going to happen at meetings is we really do have a number of very, very large projects. And as a result, they have things they have to put together. They're queued up to come to you, but there's just a list of things they have to meet. Once they're ready, they'll say, okay, we're ready. And then they're scheduled for the next meeting. But we don't have any way of predicting sort of what their timelines are, because the things they're putting together are very different, and in a lot of these cases, they're fairly new projects for Kent County. I mean, the solar field is a big project. They've got a lot to put together. There's a lot of really high-profile, new kinds of things coming down the pipeline. It's not, we're not,
Okay, I'm just-
we're not in the middle of a regular year.
Right. Thoughts from members? We don't have 2 here, but what, I mean,
Well, it seems to me that the district is going to take a lot of time and energy, because there are a number of issues here that we've already received comments from the public. And it's a meaty section, so maybe we ought to have a special meeting for that one. And the other ones, I think we could get through reasonably Officially.
I mean, of
Maybe
course,
uses would be another one
Yeah,
that would.
I think that there's several areas that we only need one, and probably, I would agree, maybe just a special meeting, because there'll be a lot of conversation, and I'm sure if it's publicized, there'll be a lot of public participation also.
Right.
So,
I see
my-
districts taking longer than any of them.
well,
Well,
districts,
We'll probably pull AZD out of it maybe anyway, if that's, I mean,
right.
Carla made a point, we should do districts
Might
first.
take two
or-
meetings, I mean, you know.
Oh, yeah, I understand, I just want to,
AZD in one, and, you know, and the balance on the other, or vice versa, but,
We probably should wait on districts and uses just a little bit, just to
Yeah.
get some feedback from the Ag Advisory Commission, because, I mean, they're so, particularly uses, it's so intertwined as to which ones Ag Advisory Commission might want to comment on.
Sure.
Versus not.
What about, and only because environmental, I have not looked at it in here, but, a lot of that is state, some of that's state regulated, we don't change a lot of that. Would it be possible to add, like, do 5 and 6 next meeting? And if we, and announce it to the public even, however we do that, but if the, in an email at least, if the agenda of October looks really long, maybe we just do environmental.
right,
So it's,
right, you don't get to the others because of time. That's
yeah, and
perfectly
we'll,
reasonable.
however you guys know how to, the public, but,
I think theoretically you could do 5, 6, and 7, because
was wondering about
many of the definitions are state-required definitions. I mean, it's a match up to the environmental regulations, so.
okay.
I
Well, I've
think there could be
recommended,
some
so that
changes
means
there.
just
I
do
think
5,
there
6,
could
and
be some
7
changes.
as one agenda item on the October meeting, and if we don't finish them, we don't finish them.
We can do that.
And then, like I say, maybe in late October, if the ag advisory is finished, we could take on a special meeting for districts, and then maybe the same for uses in November,
Yeah.
and then hopefully tidy it up.
And then there's just Article 1 left.
Yeah, the 2023 will be all in.
envision hours at a time for those two areas.
You are optimistic.
Start the new year off.
I will be hopeful, I shall be in
You will be.
As chair, you have a duty to be
Yeah,
hopeful.
yeah.
Yes.
Okay, that's plain unless anyone's got something different. I know, like I say, I just want to make sure, we can always change one, make sure the public is notified, however they want to be. Staff reports, yeah, I mean, other staff reports? Nothing, come on. Mark? Carla?
Bill, sometimes when I look at all you've done in this thing, I wonder what we paid the consultant for to tell you the
I was going to
truth.
say the same thing.
You'd have been better off not taking this job and doing the zoning court.
Thank you, I appreciate the compliment. I do have to say that, hiring a national consultant to take a look at your code, and they're able to compare it across a wide breadth of other codes, I think is an important step. And I think for this community, the big takeaway was they felt like our code really did a great job of implementing the preservation goals and the agricultural, principles of the comp plan. So, I mean, I think their opinion was good. And because their opinion was pretty high, they didn't have a lot of changes. I agree, but I did like their diagnosis. I know we went over that a long time ago. I appreciate the flattery, but I can't bring that kind of perspective ever. So, but I do like to edit, so. I got some of that done.
Doing
As
this
do I.
artificial intelligence.
Yeah, well, he only does the secondary staff reports, so.
Yeah. Sir, you've been in the audience listening. I'd love to have a comment if you were just. Good. I hope it was educational.
It is,
Good, thank you.
but thank you.
We wish the audience was full all the time with people
Thank you.
asking questions.
It's hard to do when people work.
Yes, it is. We agree.
Some of us get work to listen.
Yeah. Anyone in here have anything they'd like to add? Look forward to Cindy's report or amendment or edits.
I just had, unfortunately, I picked up the wrong bundle when I left the house. I had some spelling stuff. I'll just call you with it,
Sure. Thank you.
because I did a granular read.
If there are no other items, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Have a second?
Second.
All in favor? Aye. Thank you all very much. Thank you, staff.